Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2021 Annual Stockholders Meeting of Lopez Holdings Corporation. In compliance with Securities and Exchange Commission Memorandum Circular Number 6, Series of 2020, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. Let us all please rise for a prayer and the Philippine National Anthem.
Here we are, many are mending their broken hearts. Many are grieving and deeply wounded, defeated from those who've gone with no goodbyes. We've tried to laugh and we cheered, we cried for the selfless warriors who held the line, for you and I, for families like yours and mine. We've been through the best and worst of times, season after season, when the winds blew hard and the sun refused to shine above us. But we will sing in the storm and we will dance in the rain, though we can't come close and touch all those who now seem so far away. We're not alone in this storm, and we will pray in the rain. No, our hearts won't tire, our faith's on fire. We know our cries are heard from deep within. Well, can you heal us and make us whole again? Here we stand, forgive when we don't understand. Take our hands and help us through it, to endure it, all that's uncertain and unknown. We've been through the best and worst of times. You've seen us through each season. When the days grew dark, you were there to shine the light, to guide us. So we will sing in the storm, and we will dance in the rain, though we can't come close and touch all those who now seem so far away. We're not alone in this storm, and we will pray in the rain. No, our hearts won't tire, our faith's on fire, and all our fears are heard from deep within. And we believe that you won't leave us, 'cause it's a promise you have made. Even when our hearts get so discouraged, there's not one you will forsake. And when the waves leave us battered on the broken roads we've got to take, may we walk the way that leads to you. May it be the choice we make as we sing in the rain. Maybe then someday we'll have them close, all who seem so far away. We're not alone in this storm, and we will pray in your name. No, our hearts won't tire, our faith's on fire. We know our tears are in the hands of the one who can heal us and make us whole again. Who can make us whole again?
Mga kapamilya, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Sayang magiliw, renas ng silanganan, hanap ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lumang hinirang, tuyang ka ng pag-ibig, sa manlulupig, di ka masisingin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mo pagaw, may nilagang tulak at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang bisag ng wataran mo'y ganun ay narating, ang bituin na parang niyang kailan ka may di maghihiling. Anang araw ng walang ibang sinabi ay langit sa piling mo. Aming di kaya na pagkay ng langit na pangalay ng dahil sa'yo.
We would like to advise the stockholders that the following members of the Board of Directors are present. Ambassador Manuel M. Lopez, Chairman Emeritus. Mr. Federico R. Lopez, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Martin L. Lopez, Vice Chairman. Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, President. Ambassador Lilia R. Bautista, Independent Director. Mr. Monico V. Jacob, Independent Director. Mr. Cesar E. A. Virata, Independent Director. Senior management, as well as representatives from our external auditors, CICIP, Goris Velayo and Company, are also present at this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chairman of the Board of Lopez Holdings Corporation, Mr. Federico R. Lopez.
Good morning. The annual stockholders meeting will please come to order. Due to the current pandemic, we're holding this meeting virtually, and we thank everyone who registered, sent proxies, and are now present at this meeting. Mr. Secretary, were notices of the annual meeting provided to the stockholders?
Mr. Chairman, I have caused notices of this annual meeting to be published in accordance with applicable regulations of the Securities and Exchange Commission. In compliance with the SEC's requirements, the notice and agenda of the meeting were published in the Philippine Star and Manila Bulletin, both being newspapers of general circulation, last June 23 and 24, 2021, in both printed form and online. The meeting materials, including the notice and agenda, explanation of the agenda items, definitive information statement, registration and validation procedures for the virtual annual stockholders meeting, and the audited financial statements with the quarterly reports were also posted in the Philippine Stock Exchange's EDGE disclosure system and in the company's website. In the event of technical difficulties, disorder, or other significant problems that may disrupt this meeting, the chairman may adjourn, recess, or expedite the meeting, or take action that the chairman may determine. In such an instance, the participants are asked to stay connected to this meeting at least 30 minutes. If the meeting cannot be resumed, it will be considered adjourned and will be rescheduled to a later date and will resume from where it was prior to the problem.
Mr. Secretary, is there a quorum?
Mr. Chairman, according to our records, out of the 4,542,298,911 common shares of the corporation issued and outstanding, there are present in this meeting, virtually or by proxy, 4,115,159,517 shares of the common stock, representing at least 90.6% of the issued and outstanding voting stock. Mr. Chairman, there exists a quorum for this meeting.
Mr. Secretary, please discuss the procedures and other ground rules for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, under the company's articles of incorporation, all common shares have full voting rights. All common stockholders of record as of March 31, 2021 are entitled to register and vote the number of shares in their name as of the record date. The notice and agenda, as published, include an explanation of the agenda items. As stated in the registration and validation procedures for the virtual annual stockholders meeting furnished to the stockholders, a validation of the stockholders was conducted from July 5, 2021 to July 27, 2021. The stockholders intending to participate in the virtual annual stockholders meeting were requested to register through a designated link. Validated stockholders and proxies were sent a confirmation through email and the links to this virtual annual stockholders meeting. They were requested to cast their votes on or before July 27, 2021 at 6 p.m. through a secure online voting platform. This online voting platform contains the items for approval as indicated in the agenda set out in the notice. The proposed resolution for each of these will be shown in the screen later. The manner of voting shall be non-cumulative except as to the election of directors. Each stockholder shall have one vote for each share entitled to vote and registered in his name. The stockholders have the option to either vote in favor of or against a matter for approval or to abstain. The vote of the stockholders representing at least a majority of the shares present or represented at this meeting will be sufficient to approve any of the matters for approval. The election of directors, cumulative voting shall be allowed, and the top 7 nominees with the most number of votes will be elected as directors. Votes received through electronic voting or voting in absentia and votes cast through proxies were tabulated by the Office of the Corporate Secretary and Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation stock transfer and validated by CCIP Gores Velay and Company. The results of the voting will, with full details of the affirmative and negative votes, as well as abstentions, will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Questions and comments were allowed to be submitted during registration and until July 27, 2021. The corporation will endeavor to respond to all questions within the time allowed. These participation and voting procedures are also contained in the information statement, accessible to all stockholders through the company's website and the annual stockholders meeting portal, as well as the EDGE disclosure system of the Philippine Stock Exchange. This meeting is being recorded. Except for the designated speakers and presenters, the microphones of the other attendees have been muted.
The next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the previous stockholders meeting. May I request the Corporate Secretary to read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chairman, an electronic copy of the draft minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held last October 2, 2020 has been made available on the company's website. Management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation approve, as they hereby approve, the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting being held on October 2, 2020. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,996,140,917 shares, or 97.11% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting. 0 shares voted against, and 119,018,600 shares, or 2.89%, abstained.
This is so noted, and the resolution stands approved.
The chairman will now give his message.
Thank you. Good morning. We'll remember 2020 as a bizarre and tumultuous year, largely because of COVID-19. Today, we're living through a global pandemic that is not unique to history, except that it came upon us during a period where globalization and interconnectedness are in full swing. Thus, the effects on our lives and our economies were both instant and devastating. At Lopez Holdings, our financial performance was adversely affected by ABS-CBN's loss of franchise, as well as the lower sales volume and income from the various operating units of First Philippine Holdings that was due to the extended government-imposed lockdowns to curb the spread of the virus. Now, as the saying goes, history never looks like history when you're living through it. And it always looks confusing and messy. And it always feels uncomfortable. Now, I agree that this is how all extraordinary times look and feel like when one is in the eye of the storm. That today, it's a pandemic we're living through, and the rollout of vaccines has given us hope for a return to normalcy. However, gathering force and momentum as we speak is this even greater emergency called the climate crisis. We can already see its effects in recent news every night, from the record high temperatures in the Arctic and Antarctic, which will accelerate sea level rise in all coastal cities, the retreat of 90% of the world's glaciers, which will impact major river systems, water supplies, and food production for billions of people worldwide, the yearly wildfires in the US Pacific, Northwest, and Australia, to now the 1-in-1,000-year floods that swept through Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands just last month. Now, once the full effects of the climate crisis are upon us, however, there will be no vaccine and herd immunity to look forward to. Just the relentless pounding of the herd, as Thomas Friedman of the New York Times describes it. So that we live in extraordinary times today, with the world having just warmed 1.1 to 1.2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial times, it looks like it's going to get even weirder as we depart from conditions that all life on this planet have been accustomed to over the past thousands of years. More so, if we fail to limit the planet's warming to the 1.5 degrees. But make no bones about it. Both the struggle to adapt to climatic changes and the heroic mobilization of efforts to keep warming to within 1.5 degrees will change every industry over the next 5 to 10 years, which is the time we have left to keep the climate crisis and its vicious feedback loops from becoming irreversible. To halt global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius, the world needs to recognize that we have a carbon budget of 500 or so gigatons remaining before we blow past that point of no return. Since global emissions are 51 gigatons per year, we have less than 10 years before we use that up. We need to get this number down to zero before 2050. Not just by 20% or 30%, but down to zero. Otherwise, the Earth's warming just continues with all the terrible consequences. Now, the COVID lockdowns have only brought down global emissions by 7 to 8%. So we need COVID scale emission reductions every year till 2050 if we are to achieve that. That's the magnitude of the task. And this is bigger than anything man has ever done in the history of this planet. Now, the world either fragments and quarrels for their fair share of what's left, which will surely be catastrophic. Or we take the high road as a global community, prioritize, constrain what we do, and make the hard choices of where that remaining emissions budget gets used. Now, as the world comes to grips with this reality, we will see paradigms shifting drastically. We will go back to basics. Consumerism will hopefully be anchored less on our wants and more toward our needs. And hopefully we focus on prosperity for all, especially those left behind, rather than on simply aiming to raise GDP growth per se. Then, very importantly, we begin to reimagine and redesign our infrastructure and way of life for a changed world. Decarbonized, resilient, and socially inclusive. Thus, last year, we took great pains to crystallize our mission at the FPH Group. And I strongly believe it should ultimately be adopted across our companies. And that is to forge collaborative pathways for a decarbonized and regenerative future. Now, it's a deliberately high bar, and we're nothing short of humbled by it. But let me share a few points about this short phrase. First, the mission was hotly debated internally for months and finally crystallized our role in the transition to a decarbonized energy system. Secondly, we didn't feel it was appropriate anymore to use that word sustainable in a world that's so badly in need of healing and renewal. So we took on the challenge of using the word regenerative instead, with all of the responsibility that that carries. Now, we're not a full-on regenerative company today, and maybe no one in the world is yet. But we chose it deliberately to signal to people who work with us that they have a license to adopt this new mindset as our inherent way of doing business. And third, another deliberate word we used was collaborative, as we believe we cannot do this alone. And we, which includes our PR and CSR professionals, all have to stop seeing this as a competitive beauty contest. And I keep stressing to our people that if we find ourselves ahead and alone at the finish line, we will have failed in our mission. This is a massive undertaking, and we know we cannot possibly succeed if we go the journey alone. Now, central to our new mission is this stakeholder pentad framework. This powerful lens captures a lot of how we want to move forward. And applying this mindset means all decisions should revolve around balancing the needs of all 5 stakeholders in a specific sequence. First, your customers, then your co-creators, which are your employees, suppliers, contractors, then the earth, then the communities, and finally, your investors. The pentad necessitates that we think in systemic wholes and not in fragmented parts. Reversing the sequence, which unfortunately has permeated the thinking of most businesses in the past, just doesn't work when your primary goal of maximizing shareholder value leaves little room to benefit anything else. Now, that model of shareholder primacy above all else no longer fits with the extraordinary times that we live in. It's resulted in the mindless pursuit of growth, unbridled and conspicuous consumption, the overshoot of our planet's environmental limits, and the widening inequalities. For these reasons, capitalism today is under attack. Although traditional CSR has been good, it has its limits and may never be able to scale enough in time to reverse the damage done. There is an urgency for all of us to go beyond incremental sustainability and transform into regenerative forces that align our profit engines with the need for a better world and a safer planet. Collectively, we have the creativity and innovative energy needed to solve the world's greatest problems. And unlocking these will be the foundation to some of the greatest business opportunities in the coming century. Now, I hope that you all share my excitement and optimism as we move along our journey to a decarbonized and regenerative future for all. I look forward to your full support. Thank you. Now, our President, Mr. Salvador G. Tirona, will now give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow shareholders, a pleasant and safe morning to all. For the year 2020, your company reported 2.625 billion pesos in net loss attributable to equity holders of the parent. This is a considerable drop from a net income of 5.322 billion pesos reported in 2019. The financial performance of First Philippine Holdings, offset by the significant impairment losses of ABS-CBN, accounted for the decrease. Lopez Holdings' consolidated revenues decreased by 20% year-on-year to 107.281 billion pesos from 133.594 billion pesos. In 2020, we saw weaker performance from the operating units under Investee FPH as a consequence of the economic slowdown due to the COVID-19 quarantine measures, as well as the net losses posted by Investee ABS-CBN. Equity share in net loss from investment accounted for at equity method amounted to 7.163 billion pesos for the year 2020, from an equity share in net loss of only 977 billion in the previous year. This represents mainly the performance of ABS-CBN for the year 2020, partly offset by the share in the performance of FPH units. In 2020, ABS-CBN incurred a net loss of 13.344 billion pesos versus 2.645 billion pesos in 2019, with net loss attributable to equity holders of the parent at 13.269 billion pesos from 1.625 billion pesos in the previous year. This was after ABS-CBN recognized impairment losses and one-time expenses, which included, among others, expenses for the separation of employees, write-offs of pre-production costs, intangibles and goodwill, property and equipment, provision for doubtful accounts, and inventory impairments following the denial of the broadcast franchise in July 2020. For the full year 2020, Lopez Holdings' total consolidated assets grew to 397.97 billion pesos from 392.584 billion pesos in 2019. This figure mainly includes assets of FPH. Debt to equity ratio was maintained at 0.34 times in 2020. However, book value per share was down at 14 pesos and 12 centavos a share at the end of 2020 from a value of 15 pesos and 35 centavos a share in 2019. As of December 31, 2020, the parent company, Lopez Holdings, had no more direct obligations. On a consolidated basis, total liabilities stood at 196.947 billion pesos at year-end 2020 versus 193.527 billion at the end of 2019. FPH benefited primarily from the strong performance of its operating unit, First Gen Corporation. Moving forward, this means that FPH Energy Group would have sufficient resources to meet its obligations and fund its committed investments. Total equity attributable to parent stood at 64.148 billion pesos as of December 31, 2020, or down by 8% from 69.991 billion pesos. For the year 2020, FPH reported a 22% decrease in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent of 9.86 billion pesos from 12.583 billion pesos reported in 2019. Recurring net income attributable to FPH was at 9.406 billion pesos, or 21% lower than the 11.979 billion pesos in the previous year. As already mentioned, the downturn was generally caused by lower sales volumes and incomes of the business units, mainly reflecting the financial impact of the community quarantine measures implemented in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the current challenges, FPH forges on toward a regenerative future. As its major investee, First Gen, pursues its interim offshore LNG terminal or IOLT project. Last year, FirstGen LNG Corporation received from the Department of Energy a permit to construct, expand, rehabilitate, and modify with respect to its application for the construction of an IOLP project located in the FirstGen Clean Energy Complex in Batangas City. This will allow FirstGen LNG to bring in a floating storage and regasification unit on an interim basis and accelerate the company's ability to introduce LNG to the Philippines as early as the third quarter of next year. Also last year, FirstGen and Tokyo Gas Company Limited signed a joint cooperation agreement, or JCA, representing the next phase of their joint development of the IOLT project. Under the JCA, Tokyo Gas will have a 20% participating interest in the IOLT project and provide support in the development, construction, operations, and maintenance work to achieve final investment decision. Upon reaching final investment decision under the JCA, the parties will enter into a definitive agreement with respect to the IOLT project. Despite the difficulties and restrictions brought about by the pandemic, First Philippine Industrial Park pursued to completion 2 new clusters of ready-built factories, or RBF, as there remained a robust demand for leasable warehouse and factory space. Even with the additional 30,000 square meters, average RBF occupancy rate for 2020 reached 92%. Likewise, Rockwell Land Corporation is expanding its footprint in emerging cities with a recently launched development in Angeles City in Pampanga and in Bacolod City in Negros Occidental. These initiatives show that the companies are ready for the expected recovery of economic activity in the next couple of years. Moving on to ABS-CBN, it reported a net loss of 13.344 billion pesos in 2020, which is 404% greater than the net loss of 2.645 billion pesos incurred in the previous year. The company provided for impairments and one-time expenses totaling 5.241 billion pesos. These included, among others, expenses for the separation of employees, write-offs of pre-production costs, intangibles and goodwill, property equipment, provision for doubtful accounts and inventory impairments, following the denial of its broadcast franchise in July 2020. It must be noted that year-on-year revenues declined by 49% from 21.42 billion pesos from 42.835 billion pesos. Operating under the new normal, ABS-CBN brought back full programming through its Kapamilya channel, which is made available on Sky Cable, Cable Link, GSAT, and most member cable operators of the Philippine Cable Television and Association nationwide. It also launched Kapamilya Online Live to provide live streaming of its shows on ABS-CBN's Entertainment's YouTube and Facebook pages, available exclusively in the Philippines. ABS-CBN's digital pivot is meant to address the Filipino audience's growing demand for online content. In March 2021, ABS-CBN's Entertainment's YouTube channel became the most subscribed and most viewed in Southeast Asia, with 32.7 million subscribers and 43 billion views. Also, as of March 2021, its Facebook page, ABS-CBN Network, had 28 million followers, while its streaming service, iWant, had 11 million subscribers. Aside from its online platforms, ABS-CBN is also now airing some entertainment programs on A to Z Channel 11 through block time agreement with Zoe Broadcasting Network Inc., as well as on TV5. And just last July 1, 2021, two of its homegrown cable TV channels, Cinema One and Mix, began airing on Signal. With the loss of its free TV broadcasting franchise, ABS-CBN has endeavored to recover its audience reach through various digital platforms, as well as partnerships with other free TV broadcasters and cable operators. While the process may be slow and challenging, the company is determined to recover its audience reach and to continue its mission of being in the service of the Filipino. Let me now report on the financial performance of Lopez Holdings for the first quarter of 2021. Based on unaudited numbers for the first quarter of 2021, Lopez Holdings reported 613 million pesos in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent. This is 47% lower than the 1.156 billion net income attributable to equity holders of the parent reported for the same period last year. Lower income generated by the energy sector from FPH Group, higher foreign exchange losses, and higher equity share in net loss from ABS-CBN through Lopez PDRs accounted for the decrease. FPH, however, posted a 7% increase in net income attributable to equity holders of the parent to 3.427 billion from 3.199 billion pesos in quarter 1, 2020, despite a reported 5% decrease in revenues to 27.873 billion from 29.292 billion. Sale of electricity accounted for 83% of revenues in quarter 1, 2021, compared to 84% of revenues in the same period last year. On the other hand, ABS-CBN registered a net loss of 1.151 billion pesos for the first quarter of 2021, 156% lower than the net loss of 763 million for the same period last year. It reported unaudited revenues of 3.92 billion pesos, or 55% lower than the 8.635 billion in quarter 1, 2020. The first quarter of this year, FPH conducted a tender offer for Lopez Holdings shares. This has resulted in FPH now owning 15.68% of the issued and outstanding shares of the company. The tender offer gave us some opportunity to touch base with a number of you, our shareholders, including those who have held our shares since the initial public offering in 1993 of your company, which was then known as Benpress Holdings Corporation. During those instances, we received some words of encouragement in the light of the challenges faced by investee ABS-CBN, and also messages of hope that a new phoenix will rise once again from the ashes. We sincerely appreciate such messages and assure you, our fellow shareholders, that your management team continues to work hard, cognizant of the many risks and challenges, in order to deliver value to you and be deserving of your continued support. On behalf of Lopez Holdings Board of Directors, officers, and staff, I thank you for your continued trust and confidence. Good day to all.
Thank you, President Dory. Copies of the management report, which includes the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31, 2020, were duly published and made available to the stockholders prior to this meeting. The floor is now open for questions on the reports. Mr. Secretary, can you discuss this further?
Mr. Chairman, the management report and the financial statements include all pertinent actions undertaken during the year, as well as the activities and performance of the subsidiaries and affiliates, including the declaration of dividends by the company. The Board of Directors approved the issuance of the financial statements last June 4, 2021. In connection with this meeting, the corporation had requested its valued stockholders to submit their questions through a designated online link. In this connection, we received the following question from Ms. Carmen Marbella. What are the prospects for ABS-CBN in the future, and what is the impact on Lopez Holdings Corporation?
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question, sir?
Yeah.
Good morning, Ms. Marbella. Thank you for the question. The results of ABS-CBN's digital initiatives have been most encouraging. As mentioned in my report, it has amassed a strong following on its YouTube channel, Facebook page, and other streaming platforms. It is also working to ensure the availability of its content for its international sales and distribution, which prior to the pandemic brought in just under 1 billion pesos in sales. Aside from our partners in cable and satellite, broadcast partners such as A to Z and TV5 have allowed ABS-CBN content to be viewed in more and more homes. ABS-CBN will continue to rely on its strength in content creation. Given that ABS-CBN will take a little more time to return to profitability, it is incumbent on Lopez Holdings to conserve its financial resources and ensure that investing ABS-CBN recovers its industry leadership under this new business model. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there are no other questions that were received during the time stated in our procedures, which have not already been answered directly. For questions that were submitted after the deadline, or for additional questions from the stockholders, this may be directed to the Office of the Corporate Secretary by email at corporatesecretary@lopezholdings.ph.
Okay, may I now request the Corporate Secretary to read the proposed resolution with respect to the foregoing matters and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation, the corporation, confirm, approve, and ratify, as they hereby do confirm, approve, and ratify, the Board of Directors' approval of the audited financial statements of the corporation for the period ended December 31, 2020. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 3,996,140,917 shares, or 97.11% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the approval of the audited financial statements. 0 shares voted against, and 119,018,600 shares, or 2.89% abstained.
This is so noted, and the resolution stands approved. The next item in our agenda is the ratification of the acts of the Board of Directors and the management of the corporation. Mr. Secretary, please read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, the actions affecting the business operations, financial performance, and decisions of the corporation are also covered in our information statement, management report, chairman's message, and president's report, and in our discussions in this meeting. Management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that all resolutions and acts of the Board of Directors, as well as the acts and contracts entered into by management of Lopez Holdings Corporation during the calendar year ended December 31, 2020, and up to the date of this annual stockholders meeting, the chairman's message, and the president's report be as they are hereby confirmed, ratified, and approved by the stockholders. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record the corporation received votes or proxies representing 996,140,917 shares, or 97.11% of the shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the confirmation, ratification, and approval of the acts of the Board of Directors and of Management during the calendar year ended December 31, 2020, and up to the date of this meeting, as well as the Chairman's message and President's report rendered today. 119,018,600 shares, or 2.89%, voted against, and 0 shares abstained.
This is noted, and the resolution stands approved. The next item in the agenda is the election of directors of the corporation for the ensuing year. There are 7 seats in the board to be filled.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with the bylaws and Manual of Corporate Governance, the following have been qualified and nominated as directors of the corporation for the ensuing year. Number 1, Ambassador Manuel M. Lopez. Number 2, Mr. Federico R. Lopez. Number 3, Martin L. Lopez. Number 4, Mr. Salvador G. Tirona. Number 5, Mr. Cesar E. A. Virata. Number 6, Ambassador Lilia R. Bautista. Number 7, Mr. Monico V. Jacob. Number 8, Ms. Euni Marie Mata Perez. Number 9, Ms. Elaine Marie Aglipay Delio. And number 10, Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia. Ambassador Bautista, Mr. Jacob, Ms. Perez, Ms. Delio, and Mr. Garcia are being nominated as independent directors. The directors' qualification and professional experience are all discussed in the information statement. For the election of directors, stockholders had the option to vote their shares for each of the nominees, not vote for any nominee, or vote for one or some nominees only, in such number of shares as the stockholders prefer, provided that the total number of votes cast does not exceed the number of shares owned by them, multiplied by the number of directors to be elected, which in this case is 7. Mr. Chairman, the results of the voting, based on the votes cast received by each nominee, as tabulated by the Office of the Corporate Secretary and Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation Stock Transfer, and validated by CICIP Goris Velaya and Company, are as follows. Mr. Jack B. Garcia received 3,612,823,761 votes. Mr. Federico R. Lopez received 3,231,602,104 votes. Mr. Martin L. Lopez received 3,230,960,297 votes. Mr. Salvador G. Tirona received 3,230,785,909 votes. Ambassador Manuel M. Lopez received 3,230,474,807 votes. Ambassador Lilia R. Bautista received 3,228,606,104 votes. Mr. Monico V. Jacob received 3,228,606,104 votes. Mr. Cesar E. A. Virata received 3,226,905,273 votes. Ms. Euni Marie Mata Perez received 1,973,024,629 votes. And Ms. Elaine Marie Aglipay Delio received 353,484,631 votes. Based on the foregoing, Mr. Chairman, the following 7 nominees have received the highest number of votes and have been elected as directors. Number 1, Mr. Michael Jack B. Garcia. Number 2, Mr. Federico R. Lopez. Number 3, Mr. Martin L. Lopez. Number 4, Mr. Salvador G. Tirona. Number 5, Ambassador Manuel M. Lopez. Number 6, Ambassador Lilia R. Bautista. And number 7, Mr. Monico V. Jacob. The results of the election and tally of votes will be made part of the records. I certify that the Board of Directors so nominated have received the requisite votes for election without prejudice to a final tabulation to be made part of the records.
This is noted, and I hereby declare the said 7 nominees who received the highest number of votes to be the duly elected members of the Board of Directors of Lopez Holdings Corporation. to serve as such for the ensuing year and until their successors shall have been duly elected and qualified. The last item in our agenda is the appointment of external auditors for our corporation. May I request the Corporate Secretary to read the proposed resolution in this regard and the voting results?
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the approval of a resolution as follows. Resolved that the stockholders of Lopez Holdings Corporation hereby approve the appointment of CCIP Gores Velay and Company as the corporation's external auditors for the period 2021 to 2022. Mr. Chairman, we would like to make it of record that the corporation received votes or proxies representing 4,115,159,517 shares, or 100% of shares present or represented in this meeting, and which voted in favor of the appointment of CCIP Gores Velay and Company as the corporation's external auditors.
This is noted, and the resolution stands approved. Is there any other business to be taken up in this meeting?
There is no other business to be taken up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you to all our stockholders for attending this virtual stockholders meeting. We join everyone in praying for an end to this pandemic. You can be rest assured that we will be doing our utmost for you and for Lopez Holdings despite the challenges we face. There being no other business to be taken up, this meeting is hereby adjourned.
We wish to advise the stockholders who attended this meeting that our Investor Relations Office will be emailing those who attended to secure their feedback about the conduct of this meeting.